In a short stretch of time from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, a relatively small group of people started playing around with this thing called the World Wide Web. They had the audacity to think they just might change the world. This project introduces you to the OG players from those hallowed days and lets them tell you what it was like and how you should have been there. Welcome to episode 1 of You Should Have Been There. What a long, strange trip it's been. It's going to be myself, Kyle Shannon, and Ritesh Patel, who are going to take you on this journey. And I'm Kyle Shannon. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Storyvine, and did some stuff back in the day, which I think most of today's episode will be about. And then Ritesh.
Hi. Hey, man. How are you? I'm wearing my agency.com shirt.
You are.
I was there. I did the thing, and I have the shirt to prove it, right? So, awesome. Tell I'm currently as the Chief Digital Officer for Health in Ogilvy, but had the privilege to be part of something amazing that we're going to cover.
Yeah, indeed. And so before we dive into it, I know we're both excited to get into it, but you know, this is a live show, so we got to get some housekeeping in. So
yes,
you know, I'm not one to write things down, but I've actually written things down. So
my God, what happened?
Exactly. So this is episode 1 of You Should Have Been There. We will be going live at noon every Friday, noon EST. You can learn everything you need to learn about the show at youshoulda.com. I can't believe that domain was available, just like I couldn't believe agency.com was available back in the day when we got that. But it's a few years later for that one. But anyway, go to youshoulda.com and you can read our bios, you can learn about upcoming episodes, and you'll have the links to the Facebook and YouTube channels where everything will be archived. So that's good there. Next, if you're on Facebook or YouTube right now, if you leave us comments, we can see them, and we might even choose to feature you and show your comment here live on air. We'll make you like a superstar. By the way, not for nothing, you like the glowing shelves? I'm an influencer now. I got LED backlit shelves. It's horrible, right? The other thing, now that we have a show, we have to ask you, please subscribe. So actually, it really does help. We need 100 subscribers on YouTube to be able to get a real URL. So please do that.
Please, we need that.
And it will also, when we have shows come up, it'll let you know we're doing that. So anyway, that's the housekeeping stuff. So what I thought I would do, Ritesh, is I've been thinking about, why do this show? First of all, we just had our 25th anniversary of the founding of agency.com, and those are always really remarkable meetings. But I've been thinking about what was so significant about them that's not really obvious, right? And so I jotted down 3 things. Again, I don't really write things down, and I don't think I will for the balance of the show. But I want to sort of put these 3 thoughts out there and then just have you respond to it. So you and I were lucky enough to participate in this really remarkable time in history for kind of the mid-90s, 94, 95, through maybe 9/11 or just past the early 2000s.
2002, I think. Right?
Yeah. And the world of the World Wide Web was this incredibly small world, right? There weren't a lot of people doing it. It was a group of sort of geeky misfits. We were building some of the first websites for big companies, big and small. And in a lot of ways, what we did back then laid the foundation for a lot of the stuff we take advantage or, take for granted today. So part of it was it was a remarkable time in history. The second thing that I found really remarkable about that time is that, and what made it really magical was that there were no experts. Nobody knew what they were doing, right? You couldn't get a degree in website design. There were no UX or UI specialists. Like if you wanted to be a part of the game, you just had to be curious and a little bit geeky and kind of have the drive to do it. And so we tended to have people literally from all walks of life. Like, I have a degree in acting, and Chan was in publishing, and, we had architects. It was just people from all over the place, but they all had that sort of curiosity and drive. So that was the second thing. And then the third thing, and for me, this is the one, as I talk about my origin story, I'll try to unpack this a bit, but I feel like we had a very strong sense in those early days of how lucky we were to be a part of it that early, that the things we were doing, we were recognizing in real time, oh, this is actually changing the way these businesses are doing business. And this is changing the way we communicate. And I think we kind of knew that the things that were changing, it wasn't going to go back. And I don't know. I feel like, to a person I talk to these days, there was something about knowing that you were a part of that, even back then, that was just absolutely incredible. So anyway, that's my thoughts on to kick
wow.
this thing
I'm
off.
very impressed, and you wrote all those down, which is even more impressive for me, knowing you as well as I do. So, I would say to you, if you talk to people who worked with us, and for those of you watching, yes, this show for the next few shows is going to be all about agency.com. As I said, I'm wearing the shirt with pride. It's because we were living it, and this started, no lie, couple of gin and tonics in at about 10 at night. I text Kyle say, we had some great times back then, the whole reminiscing thing. And he's like, yeah, we did. And I'm like, we should do something. And he said, yeah, you should have been there. It was amazing. And wait, you should have been there. Let's do a show.
Well, it's also, it's one of those things where every time I tell a story from those days, someone's like, well, you should write a book. And
exactly
my point about not writing things down, like I know myself, I don't have the discipline to write a book, but I thought we should capture these stories because not to be, not to
be braggy.
Well, no, I was going to say, not to be too down or anything, but we're getting old. Like these stories are fading. I remember 3 of them.
Yeah, we need to get it down before we lose it all. It was great. The alumni thread on Facebook and all the comments from people with their little bits of memory. And I think you're right, capturing all of this in this manner. And while we're doing it for, the bulk of it is the origin story of agency.com, and being part of that environment, I think we'll probably get, and if there's anybody who wants to be on it and was part of that time, they should reach out to us and we should capture their story as well, I think, going forward. But what's fascinating to me is when we have the reunions and you talk to people, and to a person, the statement always is, that was the best time of my career.
Yeah, or I've been trying to replicate that experience for the balance of my professional career, and and that's the thing. It's like, and I have too. Like, quite frankly, like it was so magical. It's like it felt like you had a formula that you could do it again, and it really was. I think just this moment in history we were lucky enough to be a part of. So
the planets lined up, and that's maybe that's where we should start. Is there's always been these stories about you and Chan in a little room at Time Life building. And like, how did this all start with you? When you were a kid at school, did you ever sort of think about, I'm going to, conquer the web?
Kind of, but I didn't know it. So I'll tell one little, olden timey story. So when I was in 7th grade, we got our first computers. They were Radio Shack TRS-80s.
I remember those. Yeah.
And I learned basic programming on them. And I remember back then, I was like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were on the cover of Newsweek and Time. And I remember thinking I was just too young to be part of like the next Gutenberg press. And I was really bummed about that. And then, life happened, and I went to college and I got a degree in acting. I got a fine arts degree in acting.
Oh, wow. And
I moved to New York and started and ran a theater company. And I was horrible at waiting tables. So I got fired from
Thank God you weren't my waiter. That's all I can say.
Yeah. So I was doing desktop publishing as my day job. And let's see, there was, I was acting for about 4.5 years. And then I said, I'm tired of doing free theater. I want to write myself an acting career. So I started writing screenplays. So as I'm writing, I was talking to someone that I worked with, and they said, oh, you should get on this thing called Echo, which was Stacey Horn's dial-up BBS or bulletin board system.
Yeah.
Basically, back then, you would have your computer call her computer, and then people would just talk about stuff. And it was kind of like Facebook without the pictures and with much more intelligent conversation. And there were a lot of people in publishing on there, and it was really interesting. People were talking about the internet. And then at some point, I started to learn there was this thing that was out there called the World Wide Web, where you could, put things on the internet like pictures and things like that. And so I actually ended up starting the web forum inside Echo. And a number of people like Howard Greenstein and this guy named Chan Su were in this little web forum. And I was like, the more I learned about the web, what I realized about it was how you structure a website was almost identical to how do you structure a screenplay. Like a screenplay, you've got 3 acts, right? And a website, you've got 3 pages, like 3 main sections. And I was like, I think I could translate how I thought about writing screenplays to this web thing. And then I had an idea. I thought maybe I should do like an online magazine, because at that time, when you went on the internet, it was just like dissertation papers and scientific research. And I'm like, there's no art and culture here. So I went on vacation with my wife, and we came up with this concept called Urban Desires, which was an online art and culture magazine. And I put it up on the internet. I learned that how you get people to see it was you have to put it on a server somewhere. I didn't know what that was. So I found this place in California where I could upload my files that were on my computer to something in California. And so I put it there, and I went to look at my website, and none of the pictures showed up. And so I went to the web forum on Echo, and I'm like, hey, web people, none of my pictures showed up. And Chan Su said, hey, you coded them wrong. You made absolute links, and they need to be relative links or whatever it was. And so then my pictures showed up. And it was in that time I also thought, because I know so little about the web, I should probably start a little group of people that know more about this than I do. So I started this thing called the World Wide Web Artists Consortium, which became WAC, and it became this big thing. We could talk about that. But I really just did it as kind of a shameless way to surround myself with people that were smarter than I was. So at the end of one of those WAC meetings, we were sitting around talking, and Chan had done Vibe Online, and we'll talk to him next week and hear that whole story.
Yeah.
And I was doing Urban Desires, and at one point Chan said, I keep trying to sell advertisements to these big companies, and they don't have websites. And I think we could maybe sell websites to companies. And then I said, it would be like, we could be like those, men in dark suits and hats and
sunglasses. Yeah.
We'll build their websites for them and then leave. And I thought we could call it the agency. And so I went home that night, and I went on, Internic at the time and looked up agency.com, and it was available, and I just grabbed it.
Love it.
And then we ended up changing it to that. And then a thing happened that really made me realize that this was actually a significant thing. So in November of '94, I uploaded these files for Urban Desires to the server in California. And a month later, I got a note on Echo. Someone on Echo said, hey, Kyle, there's a full-page article about Urban Desires in Libération, the Parisian
newspaper. Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, what? And so I was living in New York at the time, and there was an international newsstand in the middle of Times Square.
I remember on 42nd Street. That's right.
So I called them up, and they said, we get those in, we'll get this week's in, next Sunday. So I remember I got up at 7 a.m, and I went to Times Square, and I bought this French newspaper, and I'm like flipping through the pages. And sure enough, there's this full page article with screenshots of this thing that I made on vacation, in Paris. And I realized in that moment, I said, I remember thinking this phrase in my head, oh my God, the world just changed. And I had this rush of excitement, because what I realized was this was just like Jobs and Gates had done, the personal computer.
Yeah.
In that, this was that. This was another one of those things. And I was like, I didn't think this would happen in my lifetime. And so that was that. And then, Chan and I, we went and pitched. He had some connections. He was working at Vibe, so he had connections at Time Inc. We went and we pitched Sports Illustrated about building them a website. And they're like, well, we're launching the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. So why don't you build a website for that? So that was our first job. And
that's how you ended up in the Time Life building. You basically.
Well, that's a whole other story we need to talk about with Chan.
Okay.
But it was, yeah, he had a really good relationship with the woman that headed up Time Inc. Consumer Marketing. Those are the ones that do all the sweepstakes and things.
Yeah,
like that.
You know, those records you used to buy every month.
Yeah,
from Columbia Record, whatever it was, right? Yeah.
And we went in there and we put a proposal together, and we said we want $250,000. We want office space for up to 20 people. We want 10 Macintosh workstations, and we want it by next Thursday. And it was an absolutely wild meeting. But 2 weeks later, we had offices in the Time Life building.
There you go.
At 1271.
I mean, there's your foundation, and that attitude of we can do anything and ask for anything, you know, just permeated through the organization, really, as it grew, right?
It was just ridiculous. But what I think what we sensed was, I mean, the reason we asked for space for 20 desks was, if this thing was really going to happen, it was going to happen fast. And also, quite frankly, you know, I was an actor and a screenwriter. Like, I was ready to quit my day job at a moment's notice. In fact, like when we got our first job, I quit my job, and I'm like, Chan, quit your job. Chan had like a 10-year publishing career, right? So it didn't make sense for him to quit his job.
He's sort of looking at you going, are you mad?
Yeah. So part of the reason we asked for so much is, A, we knew we could never lower our prices. We had to start at what we thought was the top. And you know, we need to see if this was a business. Was this something people were going to be willing to pay for? And it turned out the answer was yes. And it was a remarkable, we ended up closing 5 Fortune 500 companies within 3 months. It was
so what came after? So did you do the Sports Illustrated website?
We did do that. There was a technical group at Time Inc. called Pathfinder, and they did sort of
Pathfinder, yeah.
And they did this whole sort of thing where they were going to put all the Time Inc. properties under Pathfinder.
Yeah.
And so we're doing this site, and we were given like we were allowed to use, I think it was 2 minutes and 40 seconds total of video of these swimsuit models. So we had to break it up in like these 10-second little, you know, postage stamp size videos, but we put them on a website, and we thought, you know, this is going to get a lot of traffic. So we kept saying to the Pathfinder guys, like, we have a feeling this might crash your servers. And they're like, oh no, we've got plenty of bandwidth.
That's going to happen, right?
This handled, and, you know, within, you know, 15 minutes of the thing launching, crashed. You know, they were scrambling to, you know, spin up other servers and things like that. So
amazing.
Yeah, that was the beginning of it, and then it just took off from there. And it, you know, we went from just 2 of us in that office to, it was space for 20 people. We maxed it out at 46 people within 9 months. So it was absolutely insane.
So what came after? So you got Time, you're carrying on.
Yeah.
You're hiring some people, bringing people in. What are your earliest memories of some of the new people that you brought in? Any standouts on, you know, we got to hire this guy because, or it was just, you know, let's get some people in because we're starting to land this work? I
remember that the technologists were always super eccentric. And I also remember like the hiring process was, do you know how to turn on a computer? And have you thought about this even a little? And then we would hire you. And so the people that tended to work in that environment were people that were kind of inventive and were already kind of experimenting with what they wanted to do. I remember, I assume you know Clay Shirky.
Yeah.
But he worked for us for the early days. But how I found him was he put up a website on the net called, I think it was called Biff's Incredible Website or something like that. And he basically took every worst practice of HTML, like blinky tags and twirling things, and he made this horrible website. And I remember finding it, and he had his email on it, and I sent him an email, and I said, anyone who can design a site this bad come work for us. And so Clay Shirky came and worked for us for a while, and he was a site builder, and he was absolutely brilliant. And it was one of the earliest moments of that. We did these things called Geek and Tells. And what a Geek and Tell was someone would figure something remarkable out, and remarkable very much in context. Like, everything was really simple back then. Like, I remember the day we were so early that early HTML didn't have a center tag. So you literally couldn't center text or pictures. So I remember the day, I think it was Paul Galley or someone, or maybe Scott Major, who we're talking to 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
Said, hey, I figured out a way to center text. And I'm like, what? And I came over, and he goes, I created a single pixel high image that's invisible, and I created a bunch of different lengths of them, and we can kind of stack the different lengths together and center things. and I was like, everybody gather around.
Yeah, come on.
Came around and we'd all go, ooh, and then go back to their desks and start coding their things. So everything was inventing all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was just that energy, and it was beyond collaborative. It was like you couldn't do your work without knowing something, and no one knew anything. So the minute someone would learn something, we would geek and tell them, and and do that. And then Chan and I, we were out selling, and we were, we were very pragmatic about this stuff. A lot of what we did was talk about. Someone would say, well, I need a website. And we'd be like, well, why do you need a website? And they'd be like, well, my buddy on the golf course has one.
Yeah, we used to have those conversations all the time. Like, what are you going to do with it, right?
Yeah, what are you going to do with it? What are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
And so we were kind of focused on that. And so I think because of that, we got very trusted with these large brands. And, once you do something with the Fortune 500 brand, once you've done, 2 or 3 of them, you become trusted, right? It's a relatively small circle. Like, the marketing folks at those organizations talked. And so, a lot of the work we got through recommendations, but, I don't think we lost a pitch for a year and a half. I mean, it was this is fun. Our original corporate motto was figure out what sucks. Don't do that.
I remember that, Luke. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And actually, MetLife at one point made us take it down because we had it outside our office.
I remember, yeah.
We brought the chairman there, and they're like, could you remove that, please?
All the suits came in, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the idea was that nobody knew how to do this. So all you had to do was not be horrible, and you were markedly better than anyone else. And that was kind of the early days were very marked with that.
So tell me about, so first of all, we should say hi to Yuri. He's on and he's commenting.
Ah, cool.
So, one of our favorite sons is out in Israel. Hey, Yuri.
I do have the designer's cookbook.
Yeah, it shows that.
I found, so this was something that the creative team did, where they came up with all these recipes and put together this cool little cookbook.
You still have one? I used to have one. I can't find it. I've lost it. I think I got left is this shirt and a mug.
Envelope of crap, and I've got more in storage. I've got stuff. So a lot of that stuff is stuff I pulled out of this just box of crap I had. So
amazing. So tell me, so I think probably MetLife is probably the most conservative first one.
Mm-hmm.
How did that go? Did somebody refer you to MetLife? Did they call you?
Oh, that was a good story. So we had done a project. There was another agency early in those days called Modem Media up out of Connecticut.
I remember them. Yeah, out of New Canaan or somewhere.
Yep. And we had done a job with them, and whatever it was, we basically signed an agreement that we couldn't talk about that we did it. Right. It was one of those. The
subcontractors, right?
We had to remain behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And so we finished it, and we're like, we're never going to do that again. And I forget how it happened. I think someone at MetLife, Richard Penshow was the client at MetLife. I think he heard about us somehow, maybe through the Modem Media thing. It might. Oh, you know what it might have been? Yeah, this was it. I think Modem Media was talking to MetLife, and they said, "Oh, you should go talk to agency.com as well." Well, we came in and we pitched building their website, and we thought we were overpricing it, and it turns out we way undercut Modem Media. So that kind of forever severed our relationship with them. I don't think they were very happy about that. But that was one of our first big projects. And what was really exciting about the MetLife thing was, they had the Peanuts license.
Snoopy everywhere.
Yeah, and so we figured out what the website was going to be, but we also had to figure out how to incorporate all these Peanuts characters. And we ended up getting so good at the rules for how you can incorporate those characters into sites that United Media, that owned the Peanuts, would actually consult on us. How are you doing this, that, or the other? Like, our creative team actually got to become incredibly expert at generating, Peanuts graphics in a way that sort of met the licensing requirements and things like that. So that was really remarkable. But that was a multi-year relationship and really powerful, times.
And then you're off, right? So I think I joined in about 96, I think, or I can't remember. I
think that's right. I think it's 96. Well, so I don't think it's fair to let you off the hook right here, because I think your origin story for how you joined agency.com, it's absolutely one of my favorite stories of all time. And I think it says everything about you. So give me a little bit about your sort of origin story, but then, sort of how you became an employee at agency.com.
So, I was in London. I was working for Forte Hotels, and we'd hired Pictoris, I think, which was the French agency, to do our website. I think 94. It was we owned Le Meridien Hotels. And so, I get laid off. We got acquired in a hostile takeover. It was the company. We were a public company, Forte PLC, and so Pictoris, hey guys, sorry, I'm not going to be able to pay you because I'm not your client anymore. But I'll introduce you to the guys who bought us. And the guy there is like, hey, I just sold my business to these Americans. Maybe you should go check them out and go to work there because they'll need people like you.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So I think I showed up in the office.
Well, but you sent, as I recall, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 emails or something
something like that, 20, 30.
Ridiculous amount of emails that we never responded to, right? So
I think Eamon and Andy responded to one because I sent it to the London office as well as the New York office, right? We weren't doing the broadcast.
I don't think we were with them yet.
Huh?
I don't think we were with them yet, were we?
I think so.
Oh, were we?
So I think that was the time when I joined. I think I gotta get my dates right. As you can see, we're both getting old.
So anyway, we were so busy in those days. Like the first 9 months of agency.com was 14-hour days, 7 days a week, right? So we were just buried, right? So anyway, we effectively completely ignored you. And
exactly.
What did you do?
I remember coming to New York, I just showed up at the office in Manhattan and
from London. You got on a plane.
Yeah. And hang out with Liz Pastore out front. She's like, why are you here? And I've got my resume, I've got this here. And she says, well, hang on. And she's making frantic phone calls, right? And there's nobody around, right?
Yeah.
And I think you guys are all out or something. She's like, there's nobody here. So I'll wait. Sat down. And we waited, and she'd offer me coffee. She was very nice. I was like, at one point, it was like, it came to lunchtime. I showed up at 9 o'clock, and she's like, I think I'll go get some lunch, and I'll be back. And she was recommending places for me to go to outside, And I came back at, I think, 2 o'clock. You came up, and like, can I help you? So we had a chat, and then Chan had a chat with me, and then, and then it took off after that. And, I got hired as the VP of technology at agency.com, which was amazing,
I remember we hired you on the spot because
and then I didn't show up for a while because I was trying to figure out, I was commuting. The family was in Virginia. We'd moved to Virginia to work for Perot Systems, I think, initially. And so back and forth for a little bit. And then I finally showed up, and It was just like, what have I done? The pit. I remember going down into the pit for the first time.
That was at 665 Broadway, right?
Yeah, it was moved to 665 Broadway by the time I showed up. Mitch Golden was there as well, who basically, this is how it went with the interview with Mitch after you guys saw me. When can you start? I don't know, next week? Good. That's it? Yeah, that's it. You can start next week. I'm like, wait, you don't want to know? No, I've seen your resume. You can start next week. Basically, because he was tired of being the VP of technology. He was like, anybody can take this job. I just don't want it anymore.
Yeah. And I'll talk about the pit. So the pit at 665 Broadway was this really tall building in Manhattan. And it was actually two buildings that were connected. And so we had one office in one building.
One side, and then you have to go downstairs. Yeah, you have to cut through and go down, right?
But the floors were uneven, right?
Yeah. So, remember, Barbara used to sit in the corner there.
Yeah.
In Sugarman's office. Remember, you had to walk past Barbara to go down into the pit, right?
Yes. So in the upper floor was project management and an account, right? Yeah. It was all the business people.
Yeah.
And then you'd round the corner and you go down a level to the pit, and we called it the pit because it was like a brick wall and it was really dark and
very dark down there.
And then the creative people were like, I hate all these lights, so they break all the lights and turn them out. So it was literally like this dark pit, and it was whatever, I don't know, 15 or 20 people.
Yeah, just
like the level of creativity in that group. Anyone that was in the pit, they were building sites, they were doing graphics, they were figuring things out. I remember we would launch sites. I remember Scott Major figured out, he went to Radio Shack. We had this idea of, when we launch a site, it should be a launch. So he went to Radio Shack and he bought a big red button and figured out how to hack a mouse. And what we actually did was we built the website and launched it, and then we pulled up the old site in a browser and we just positioned the mouse over the reload button. And then we brought the client down in the pit, and we had champagne, and we said, all right, you ready to launch your site? And we counted down from 10. And then we had the client smack the big red button, push the reload button in their new site. Woo!
That's where the red button came from. Ah, Scott Major's responsible for that.
Exactly.
Okay. I never knew that.
That was one of our early innovations, right?
There you go. What other innovations? I mean, you must have, there was, I remember it was dial-up. I think it was 14.4 modems had just come out, I think, at the time, maybe 28.8 by the time we were done.
Yeah, I mean, there were sort of innovations on the technology front, but there were also, we were just north of Punky Kids, right? Meeting and working with some of the largest brands in the world, and one of the ones, and there's actually some innovative ideas here that you and I talked about before that we can talk about, but I'll talk about one that for me represented like a real turning point for agency.com. It was kind of like, I felt like we had grown up to some level, and it was British Airways. So British Airways, they put out an RFI, just a request for information, right? It wasn't an RFP. And they sent the RFI to 43 American companies and obviously some European companies, right? But they sent it to 43 American companies. And to give you a sense of British Airways, it was a 38-page RFI. So it was this incredibly detailed, complicated thing saying, we're looking for, a website agency, and, let us know who you are and if you're interested. And so we fill out all these things and we send it in, and, just weeks go by. And like 3 weeks later, we get a call, and it was Julia Groves. And she said, congratulations, you've been, we're going to invite you to come pitch British Airways in London. And she goes, by the way, you're the only company out of 43 that we selected. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, why? And she said, because out of 43 American companies, you were the only company that answered our questions in the order that we asked them. And I was like, holy crap. So like, I was blown away on a bunch of levels, right? One of them was, seriously, 42 other companies? Like,
You could follow the instructions, right?
Yeah. But the other one is like, that was the mindset of British Airways,
Yeah.
right? They were
Yeah.
incredibly remarkable.
I remember that.
So then this was a huge deal, right? They had never hired, anyone outside of England, right? This was a big deal, even to be pitching it, and they were going to fly us over. And I remember we took sort of our top echelon, like our VPs, anyone who was doing any client work that was any good, and we pulled them off that work for like 3 weeks to put this pitch together. And we did this crazy pitch, and we were going over there, and we thought, hey, if we're going to be in London, one of the questions they're going to ask, because I'm pretty sure it was one of the questions was, how are we going to reach you? Like, if you're not local.
Right.
So we thought, we've got to get a local office. So like one of the things we did was we rented a flat in downtown London, and we hired a temp, and we ran a telephone into that office. And we printed up business cards. So we flew over, and we got to fly BA first class, which was remarkable. We flew over. It was a big room. We did our pitch, and we said, and if you need to get in touch with us, we handed out our cards that had this London address on it. And they said, oh, you have a London office? We're like, yeah, we do. And they're like, do you mind if we actually call it? They tested us in the room. They picked up the phone and dialed the number on the card, and we had an intern, like just a temp, sitting in the middle of an empty apartment in London. Picked up the phone and said, agency.com, how can I help you? And they're like, okay, I guess this is real. And they hung up.
Ooh, I love it.
So, what do you remember from that pitch?
The big thing that I remember was after the pitch, the IP address targeting of Julia as she wandered around the web. We're like, Julia, we really want your business, Julia, we'd love to work with you, I was like, and I was just shaking my head going, that's not only creepy, but just crazy, right? How could
Did you respond to that?
Only we would come up with that, and guess what? We won the work, right?
Yeah.
Only we would come up with that. So that was amazing. That's the only bit. There were so many things like that. I remember folks sort of saying, we're going to go to, as Bill was saying in our episode 0, come and meet the CEO of Colgate Palmolive because you're doing their website, right? And we were all very, very young and just walk in as if we own the world. We knew it, and if we didn't, we'll figure it out. There were many a time where, like David Bortnicek from the dev group would come over and say, I just don't know. It's just, I can't fix it. I don't know what to do. And then Mitch Golden will go, well, let's try this. And somebody else will go, well, do that. And then before you know it, oh, that works. All right. Somebody make a note of that. So if we face that again, let's make sure we do that. So nothing was a problem. It was just like, we'll figure it out. There's got to be a way to do this, right? Just like the red button that you put together.
Yeah. And it was like that with, that was, we had Urban Desires, the online magazine. So my wife was the editor of that. So she did all the content for that. But the creative team at agency.com, they got to use Urban Desires as a place to innovate because a lot of our clients were very corporate, right? We had Hitachi, and they were very sort of by the book, and MetLife, very by the book. So we had a playground where the designers and the coders could actually innovate, and we did some decently innovative stuff over there that then got migrated into the other thing. But it was just such an inventive time. Like there just wasn't a blueprint for how you do this stuff. The closest thing to it was CD-ROM design, but that was sort of very packaged. And then, sometimes people would have experience. They had done something on AOL or Prodigy or something like that. But those were also these very restrictive, sort of walled gardens. And this web thing was you could do some of the stuff like you could do with a CD-ROM, but it was connected to all of the other websites in the world. And that's the thing that made it, that's the thing we take for granted today, that when you'd realize, oh, I could click on this and it would pull all the data from that site, and then I could spin it up in some interesting way and put it on this other site, right? That was all the stuff that was just no one, had really done it before, and we were figuring out how could you push the limits.
We've got to talk about one thing. So Adobe announced last year, but it's the end of Flash at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So Flash is going to be dead and buried at the end of the year. And I'll never forget when Tom Ford came and we were going to do Gucci. Marisha, managed to get us in there, and we had the creatives. One day he came home from lunch and you were looking for people and there was nobody around. Where is everyone? I'm like, they're all there. Tom Ford's here. So the entire creative department was in this room like this.
Yeah.
But, so I think it was Nick Lynn and Jason and Folkus, and they were trying to figure out, and Penny Hardy, I think, as well, what should we do? And Jason and Folkus, they're like, we got this thing. It's called Flash. We think we can do something with it.
Yeah.
And the rest of the guys were like, no way. And they went, right? And then they came back like a couple of weeks later, and we were just blown away that you could move things on a website and they could do animation.
That was you had mentioned before that one of the creative directors in that Tom Ford meeting said, what should the website be like? And what was his response? It should be
sex, but not porn.
Yeah, it should be sex, but not porn.
Yeah.
And so then when they said, oh, we should do this Flash thing and it could make things move, we're like I'm imagining like little icons flying on.
Yeah, so they do, right.
So when they came back to show us what they had come up with, you want to describe it? Because it was
crazy. They had some tests going, and there was one where it's sort of a black and then a circle came out, and then Kate Moss walked on the screen in a fur coat, turned around, dropped the fur coat and walked back with a Gucci bikini on, and then curtains open and said, welcome to Gucci.com. And that was one of the first experiments they used for Flash. And I mean, literally, I remember just sitting there going, whoa.
Yeah, because there was audio to it. It was a movie.
Yeah.
It was, one of the things that we were doing back then that I'm really proud of, that I feel has been lost a little bit as the web has evolved, is when it was appropriate, we were doing very experiential sites where it didn't just have to be, here's the 6 choices across the top and here's the content management system that spits it out. It could be a brand experience. And I feel like that's gotten lost a bit as things have gotten more e-commerce and things like that. And the IAB has created, the banner system, and, they have to be this size, and, none of those rules existed. So
remember Coca-Cola, the bubbles?
All the bubbles would fly up, and exactly. Yeah.
And
so
the sound of the fizz, and, I think Tori was working on that site for a while with Nicole and those guys. But there was so crazy stuff like that. I remember the San Antonio project, and, just being marveled at HT's genius in connecting a central database to a website with a Flash movable navigation interface over a map.
Yeah, it looked like a CD-ROM interface.
Yeah, right? And it was connected to the back end where he would pick up a phone and he could get the same information by pressing 1, 2, and 3. And then he whipped out his little Palm Pilot that he had, and he could do the same thing on his Palm Pilot in black and white. It was just wild stuff.
Yeah.
Wild stuff.
Yeah. There was also the there were a bunch of innovations toward the end. Once we sort of broke past 2000 and it started to get real, like the web, that whole world started to get really oversaturated.
About 1999.
99. Yeah. But we were doing things like smartphone applications. We were doing
interactive TV. Remember that with Tim Smith and Dan Sellers, right?
And I remember we did a pitch for it was a roller coaster show for, I think, Discovery Network, where you could change where you sat in the car. You could ride the roller coaster in real time, and you could switch between views. And we were doing all this remarkable stuff, and it was like, we're going to get to do this for TV and phones and this and that. And then the .com bubble burst, and like all that stuff just blew up. All the innovation it was not as much in demand anymore. There wasn't
we've got about 15 minutes to go. I want to ask you a couple of questions. One of them is around the agency.com Innovation Lab. How did you come up with that?
Well, the agency.com Innovation Lab. So a couple of things had happened.
Who was running it? It was Paul Galley, right? Wasn't it you and Paul Galley and Tim, I think?
Tim Apnell, yep.
Tim Apnell, that's right.
It was So a couple of things happened. So I was chief creative officer for the first bunch of years.
Yeah.
Then I switched over to chief people officer. I took over HR because the reason I did that, I had, when we moved into 20 Exchange Place, I had 3 people within 1 month walk into my office and quit within 2 weeks of being hired because no one had introduced themselves to them. They didn't have a computer. They didn't know what to do. So like, I'm just going to leave. I had 3 of those in 1 month. So I took over HR. And then we got that stabilized, but then, the dot-com bubble burst and we started consolidating. And so basically, I thought, well, I'm the innovative guy for agency.com, so we got to keep innovation going. But no one was really buying innovation. So it was basically a lab off in the corner to do innovation, and we would hand that to the teams. The problem was none of the teams wanted it because none of their clients wanted innovation. They wanted what's worked before.
That's right.
All we're spending money on. I remember sort of 6 months after the bubble burst, we had a client that had committed to $20 million for the following year for 2001. They called us up in November and said, hey, it's probably not going to be $20 million next year. It's probably going to be more like 100,000. And so you had things like that where things just got dramatically conservative. So I was sort of off doing innovation, screaming in a canyon that no one could hear the echoes in. It was very, very sad violin kind of time.
Well, we can't miss the 30 people in 30-day hiring spree you went on when you first became the chief people officer. And what the mind-numbing interviews you made us managers go through with people that were just coming in literally off the street.
We were understaffed, and it was it was another one of those things where it was just like the people were like, well, we're never going to be able to do this, and I was just stupid enough to go, well, why can't we?
Right,
30 people in 30. We can hire 30 people in 30 days. I didn't really have any sense. I didn't run HR before, but that was a thing about folks at agency.com. Like when I put that out there, like while people might have rolled their eyes in the background, what they did in the foreground was they went, okay, well, what do we need to do that? Well, if we were going to do that, we would have to interview this many people a day. Right. Okay, well, in order to do that, we need
to have this many people coming in. Yeah.
So I kind of felt like no matter what the problem was back then, the way that culture was okay, we can do that. Let's attack it. Let's attack the problem solve it, and we'll come out the other side of it. And almost always did.
I think, the culture is a very important piece of this. I think, we were always compared with Razorfish and IXL and Organic and Sapiens. But we have this unique thing around working with big brands, but being so crazy and innovative and nothing phases us kind of a culture that we had. And it was really interesting that as we grew, and even when we went public and even after that, that culture remained. It was so ingrained in everything that we were doing that even with the bubble bursting, there were still ways of, I remember the last pitch I did before I left the New York office with Adam and Katie with JetBlue. And the spirit was still there. There was only 6 of us, but we can do this, right? Yeah. We can take these people on, and that spirit remained. And I think that's the most interesting thing was you were allowed, because we were making it up, mistakes were just, hey, we'll figure it out, because nobody knew how to do it better or worse, right?
Yeah. I think there was also, I don't think there was a lot of ego about where an idea came from.
That's right.
Which was a huge thing.
That's right.
And then I think it was also just we took great pride in solving the problem, but we didn't take ourselves too seriously. So even though it was hard, we'd go have a beer afterwards. We'd go to the Stinky Bar and
remember that? Yeah,
Stinky Bar, which is 65. So it was like the level of bonding was incredible because it was so intense, right? You were working with massive brands and like British Airways, our first review with them, they told us to give ourselves, a self grade. And I think we gave ourselves a C plus because we didn't want to give ourselves an A. We knew we'd done A-level work, but we didn't want to be jerks.
Yeah.
And we present our grade to them, and they said, you got a D- and we're about to fire you. And we're like, holy crap. Like, so we were dealing with some intense stuff at the time, but it never felt heavy in those early days. Right? It always felt like, okay, we can get through this. We can get through this. And so like the level of bonding that happened, and I think, Bill said this last week, but I agree with it. Like the level of talent, I think because people came in with an open mind and that level of curiosity and drive, the level of talent was just remarkable.
Yeah. Some amazingly smart folks I had the pleasure to work with and still stay in touch with a lot of them who've gone on to do amazing things. Some of the folks have done, I mean, Major's a big shot over at Deloitte Digital, some $20 billion company, right? And he was the original Time Life guy, right?
So, yeah, he was employee number 4. He was the original architect of the pit. He helped create TAPENET, which was TAPENET's a funny story. So TAPENET. So we move into 1271 Avenue of the Americas, Time Life building, right on 6th Avenue in Manhattan. This giant building, and we're getting ready to do our first job, and I think we had won MetLife at this point. Like we're rolling, and so we said to the IT department of Time Inc., there's all these Ethernet ports on our walls. We just need to know where they terminate so we can put our internet boxes, right? Our routers, so we can share files. And they said, oh, okay, yeah, we'll get back to you in 2 months. And so we're like, we don't have 2 months. So we took our Ethernet, we ran it into one of our routers, and then we just bought a huge spool of Ethernet wire, and we literally duct taped it to the walls and ran Ethernet to all of the computers, which when you only had 4 or 5 people there wasn't bad. Okay. But I remember there was a point where the fire marshal came in. We had about 40 people working in a space for 20, and it was literally like a cable of Ethernet wires. There was just duct tape and wires hanging from the walls. The fire marshal walked into the room. He looked at us. He looked at the person he was with, and he goes, I was never in this room. And he turned around and walked out. Like, it was just nuts. Like everything was that. Like everything. I love it. We can't do it. Tape it to the wall.
There you go. Startups, right? Amazing. And look, today, it's Wi-Fi and you just go anywhere you want and you've got a phone and an iPad and you're off and running, right? It's incredible that in those days, those are the kinds of things you had to do to keep going and make things happen. So now you're innovating again. You're an entrepreneur again. What's that all about and what's it like?
Well, it's, I talked earlier about a lot of people I talked to were trying to replicate that experience. And I think I've tried to do that. The company that I have now has been percolating in my head for about 15 years. I started a company in 2006 that was the precursor to it. And the basic idea was it shouldn't be an abject nightmare to make a 2-minute video, and there's got to be a better way to do it. And so I don't know if it's, I'm a sociopath, but it is bizarre that I've stuck with this idea for this long, right? Storyvine's an 8.5-year-old company. When we hit our 5th year anniversary, I thought, well, that's a good milestone. I should take stock, right? And I thought, oh yeah, where were we at 5 years at agency.com? And I was like, oh, we were 2,200 people in public. Yeah. At Storyvine at 5 years, we had just laid everyone off. It was, Monique and I just cranking and burning and just trying to get this thing off the ground. And, it's finally starting to take off. So part of the thing for me is, I think the thing that I've done well in my career as an entrepreneur is I have tried to listen to that voice inside is like, is this really worth it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And for something like Storyvine, it is still worth it, but it's been 15 years, in some form or another. And so, that's it. How about you? Like what for you, what do you take away from that early era or like, how has that colored how you do what you do?
Oh, no, impacted, right? Before that I was in IT and I was doing IT stuff mainly.
Yeah.
And the agency.com experience, you learn so much about the importance of culture, the camaraderie that had to be created amongst teams to actually deliver something. There has to be a way. This is just not right. I can't take no. Even today, I was exchanging Slack messages with a colleague of mine And I'll quote you because I'll quote her because I asked her how a meeting went this morning that I couldn't attend. I'm just reloading Slack so I can actually read the statement to you, because I think that encompasses what we created and we've lived through and we have inherently built, those of us who worked in that time. So I said, I'm sorry I missed the meeting. How was it? She said it was fantastic. Again, Ritesh's magic bag of tricks delivers. You never know what creative solution he'll pull out of his bag, but there will always be one.
Wow.
So it's like, that culture was bred into us at that young age in our growing careers, and I live through it every day. I think it's been, and I showed some Ogilvy creatives not too long ago the San Antonio video that I still have of the user interface, and they were like, "This was when?" I was like, "Yeah, 1997."
Yeah.
Right. And they're like, "Holy moly," because they're like, "This is amazing. We could do this today." Right. So
it's crazy. I think one of the things we should do on this show is have on the teams that did some of that work.
Yeah, I think so.
And bring it on and show the work and really dig deep. I mean, as you can imagine, there are so many stories to tell just between you and I. We could do it, but I think the idea here, one of the things I realized as you and I were kicking around the idea of, how do we get this thing in the world, is everyone's got their own perspective, right? Yeah. So telling the stories from lots of different lenses, I think is going to be really interesting. And I feel like this is an important time. I'm also excited. You and I know the agency.com world well, so we can tell that story and we've got access to those players. But I'm excited also to bring on, Craig and Jeff from Razorfish, like some of the interactions.
John from Organic, Nelson. John from Nelson, or Matt Freeman from, GB and Tribal, right?
Right, exactly. Tim Smith from Red Sky, right?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people out there that were a part of this that we overlapped with, that again, they have a whole different world of experiences. So for me, the exciting thing is just kind of keep teeing up the stories and let people, share them from those different experiences to round out what it was really like back then.
I think we should get Louis Gersh from Gersh Venture Partners. He was one of the OGs of the Silicon, Alley.
We should do
that when he started funding those startups, right?
Didn't you work on Fubu?
Yeah.
So we should get Damon.
We should, absolutely. Fubu.com, I remember that.
Right.
That was a crazy time. We could do a whole hour just on Fubu.com, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, this was great, Carl. I hope those of you who are watching, all four of them, let's see, Carissa says hello. Britta says hello. So thank you for tuning. If you're still with us, thank you for, sitting through the whole thing. And, this is going to be fun. I think we've got guests lined up till January at the moment, booked, but I'm hoping that those who had these moments with us will also come on and share those with us and for folks who are watching.
Yeah, well, you've got our social tags up on the screen right now, so drop us a line. Go to youshoulda.com and that'll give you all the information. We'll also have archives of the show there, and the archives will live on YouTube and Facebook. We'll be out there. But anyway, this was a pleasure, Ritesh.
I hope a gentleman and a scholar.
Everyone, but this was a pleasure, and I will see you next week, fine sir.
Superb. Have a great weekend and fantastic Thanksgiving, Kyle.
Likewise.
But I'm sure we'll chat way before then.
Great.
All right, sir.
Yes, sir.
Cheers.